What if I told you that the son of a blacksmith from a small Italian town rose to become one of the most controversial leaders in modern history, forever shaping the face of Europe? Benito Mussolini, the man who would later rise to infamy as the dictator of Italy, was born on July 29, 1883, in the modest town of Predapio, nestled within the Emilia-Romagna region. The backdrop of his early life was shaped by the contrasting ideologies of his parents, whose influence left indelible marks on his character and worldview. Mussolini's father, Alessandro Mussolini, was a fervent socialist and an outspoken blacksmith. Known for his sharp tongue and revolutionary ideals, Alessandro often wrote incendiary articles for socialist publications, advocating for workers' rights and railing against the conservative establishment. Despite his idealism, Alessandro's authoritarian streak left a complicated legacy, instilling in young Benito a paradoxical combination of discipline and defiance. He was a man who believed in challenging the status quo, a trait his son would adopt with fervor in his later years. On the other hand, Benito's mother, Rosa Maltoni, a devout Catholic and elementary school teacher, provided a stark contrast to her husband's radicalism. Rosa's faith and commitment to traditional values imbued the Mussolini household with a sense of order and morality that occasionally clashed with Alessandro's revolutionary fervor. Rosa doted on her eldest son, and her influence tempered some of Benito's more impulsive tendencies, at least during his formative years. Despite the seemingly stable family environment, Benito's childhood was far from idyllic. As the eldest of 3 children, he often bore the brunt of his father's high expectations and was subjected to strict discipline. Alessandro's belief in forging his son into a revolutionary figure led to Benito being exposed to socialist rhetoric and political discussions at an early age. This exposure laid the groundwork for Benito's eventual embrace of political activism, though his interpretations would diverge significantly from his father's ideals. Young Benito displayed a precocious, albeit unruly, personality. From an early age, he exhibited a fiery temper and a penchant for challenging authority. His rebelliousness manifested vividly during his schooling years. He frequently clashed with teachers and peers, earning a reputation as a troublemaker. On one occasion, his volatile nature led to a notorious incident where he threw a chair at his teacher, resulting in his expulsion. His academic record was punctuated by such disciplinary infractions, and he was forced to attend multiple schools due to his unruly behavior. Despite his erratic behavior and lackluster academic performance, Benito demonstrated remarkable intellectual curiosity. He voraciously read political philosophy, history, and literature, absorbing ideas that would later inform his political doctrines. He particularly admired the works of Friedrich Nietzsche, Karl Marx, and Giuseppe Mazzini, though his ideological leanings would ultimately synthesize into a unique and often contradictory vision. Another notable trait that set Mussolini apart was his charisma and natural flair for oratory. Even as a young man, he enjoyed engaging in heated debates and was known for his ability to command attention through impassioned speeches. This knack for rhetoric allowed him to mask his academic deficiencies and project an image of intellectual depth and conviction. The socio-political environment of late 19th century, Italy also played a crucial role in shaping Mussolini's early worldview. The country was grappling with the aftershocks of its unification, and widespread poverty and inequality created fertile ground for radical ideologies. Benito's exposure to these struggles, coupled with his father's influence, instilled in him a sense of social injustice and a desire to challenge the established order. Though his early life was marked by instability and academic struggles, these formative years laid the foundation for Mussolini's eventual rise. His defiance, charisma, and ideological experimentation, combined with the contrasting influences of his parents, helped shape a complex and ambitious individual. Mussolini's journey from the rebellious son of a socialist blacksmith to a political force on the world stage began with these turbulent and defining early years. Mussolini's early political inclinations closely mirrored his father's fervent socialist convictions, yet his intellectual development extended well beyond the boundaries of his upbringing in Predapio. As a young man, Benito devoured socialist literature, immersing himself in the works of Karl Marx, Friedrich Engels, and other revolutionary thinkers. These readings instilled in him a deep understanding of Marxist theory and its critique of capitalism, fueling his ambition to challenge the socio-economic inequalities that plagued early 20th century Italy. In 1902, Mussolini took a decisive step that would broaden his ideological and personal horizons. Facing potential persecution due to his radical views and confrontational activism, he fled to Switzerland. This period of self-imposed exile proved transformative. Switzerland, with its vibrant and politically diverse atmosphere, served as a crucible for Mussolini's ideological maturation. During his time in Switzerland, Mussolini immersed himself in the international socialist milieu, attending meetings, engaging with other radicals, and sharpening his oratory skills. He supported himself through various odd jobs, including as a mason and tutor, while continuing his political education. His exposure to a more global perspective of socialism expanded his understanding of the movement beyond Italy's borders. It was also in Switzerland that Mussolini began to encounter conflicting ideas that challenged his beliefs, subtly planting the seeds of the ideological evolution that would later define his career. Mussolini's activism did not go unnoticed. In 1903, he was arrested and briefly jailed for promoting a general strike. This arrest, rather than deterring him, enhanced his reputation among socialist circles as a fiery and uncompromising advocate of the working class. By the time he returned to Italy in 1904, he had not only cemented his socialist convictions, but also honed the skills that would make him a formidable political figure. Back in Italy, Mussolini quickly rose through the ranks of the Italian Socialist Party, PSI. His fiery temperament and unparalleled rhetorical abilities set him apart as a leader capable of galvanizing support. He soon found his calling as a journalist, a role that allowed him to channel his ideological fervor into writing. His contributions to various socialist publications were characterized by impassioned critiques of the capitalist system and scathing denunciations of the ruling elite. These articles, written in a style that combined intellectual rigor with populist appeal, struck a chord with the working class and positioned Mussolini as a powerful voice within the socialist movement. The defining moment of his socialist career came in 1912 when Mussolini was appointed editor of Avanti, the official newspaper of the PSI. This role catapulted him into the national spotlight and allowed him to shape the narrative of the socialist movement in Italy. Under Mussolini's editorial leadership, Avanti saw a significant increase in readership thanks to his provocative headlines and emotionally charged articles. He used the platform to advocate for radical reforms, call for strikes, and criticize Italy's involvement in colonial ventures. However, even during this peak period of his socialist activism, cracks began to appear in Mussolini's ideological consistency. While he remained committed to Marxist principles, his writings and speeches started to reflect a growing emphasis on national pride and the unique struggles of the Italian working class. This marked a subtle but significant departure from the internationalism that was central to orthodox socialist ideology. Mussolini's volatile temperament and willingness to resort to extreme measures also created tensions within the PSI. His confrontational style and tendency to alienate those who disagreed with him foreshadowed his eventual break with the movement. As World War I loomed, Mussolini's ideological shifts became more pronounced. His advocacy for Italy's involvement in the war, a stance that directly contradicted the PSI's anti-war position, was the final straw that led to his expulsion from the party in 1914. Despite his eventual estrangement from socialism, Mussolini's contributions to the movement were undeniable. As a gifted orator and propagandist, he had successfully mobilized large segments of the Italian working class, popularizing socialist ideas and challenging the entrenched capitalist establishment. However, the nationalist undertones in his rhetoric and his growing disillusionment with international socialism hinted at the ideological transformation that would soon define his political career. The years of socialist activism and journalism were pivotal in shaping Mussolini's identity as a political figure. They provided him with the tools, rhetorical skill, ideological flexibility, and a deep understanding of mass mobilization that he would later wield to devastating effect as the leader of a radically different political movement. The outbreak of World War I in 1914 marked a decisive turning point in Benito Mussolini's political evolution and laid the foundation for the emergence of his fascist ideology. At the time, Mussolini was a prominent figure in the Italian Socialist Party, PSI, and editor of its official newspaper, Avanti. However, the war exposed deep ideological divisions within the socialist movement, forcing Mussolini to confront a choice that would forever alter his trajectory. While the Socialist Party adhered strictly to its anti-war stance, viewing the conflict as a capitalist struggle that exploited the working class, Mussolini began to advocate for a radically different perspective. He argued that the war presented Italy with an unparalleled opportunity to assert its national strength, expand its territories, and solidify its position among the great European powers. This shift from internationalism to nationalism alienated him from the socialist establishment. His vocal support for Italy's intervention in the war was deemed a betrayal of socialist principles, leading to his expulsion from the party in November 1914. Undeterred, Mussolini quickly repositioned himself as a pro-war nationalist. To advance his new agenda, he founded the newspaper Il Popolo d'Italia in 1914. The publication became a mouthpiece for his calls for intervention, blending patriotic fervor with promises of national rejuvenation. Through Il Popolo d'Italia, Mussolini championed the idea that the war would catalyze the creation of a new Italy, a nation revitalized by sacrifice, unity, and military strength. His rhetoric resonated with a growing segment of disillusioned Italians, particularly among young nationalists, war veterans, and those who felt marginalized by the existing political order. By 1915, Mussolini's vision aligned with national policy when Italy joined the war on the side of the Allies, declaring war on Austria-Hungary. Determined to prove his commitment to the cause, Mussolini enlisted in the Italian army, serving as a soldier on the front lines. His experiences during the war were transformative. Stationed in the trenches, Mussolini endured the harrowing realities of modern warfare, including relentless artillery barrages, disease, and the psychological toll of prolonged combat. In 1917, his military service was abruptly ended when he sustained severe injuries from a mortar explosion during a training exercise. The incident left him with numerous wounds and required an extended recovery period. Although his time on the battlefield was cut short, it profoundly influenced his worldview. The war reinforced Mussolini's belief in the necessity of discipline, hierarchy, and military strength as the cornerstones of a strong society. He became increasingly convinced that Italy needed a new political order capable of uniting the fractured nation and addressing its deep-seated economic and social challenges. Beyond its personal impact on Mussolini, World War I had far-reaching consequences for Italy. The war placed enormous strain on the Italian economy, disrupting industries, inflating prices, and leaving millions unemployed. The returning soldiers faced a society plagued by economic instability, labor strikes, and political unrest. Widespread dissatisfaction with the government's inability to address these issues created fertile ground for the rise of radical political movements. Seizing the moment, Mussolini began to consolidate his ideas into a new ideology that synthesized elements of nationalism, socialism, and militarism. This ideology rejected traditional class struggle in favor of a unified national identity, which he believed could be achieved through strong leadership and collective sacrifice. By 1919, these ideas coalesced into the formation of the fascist movement, Fasci di Combattimento, marking the beginning of Mussolini's meteoric rise to power. The war also provided Mussolini with a valuable platform to establish himself as a champion of disaffected veterans and nationalists. His speeches and writings appealed to those who felt betrayed by the post-war settlement, particularly the perceived inadequacy of the Treaty of Versailles, which failed to deliver the territorial rewards Italy had been promised. This sense of national humiliation, combined with Mussolini's charismatic leadership, helped galvanize support for his nascent movement. In retrospect, World War I was a watershed moment in Mussolini's life. It marked his definitive break with socialism, cemented his transition to nationalism, and provided him with the experiences and ideological framework necessary to create fascism. The war's upheaval not only shaped his personal and political beliefs, but also created the social and economic conditions that would allow him to rise as one of the most controversial leaders of the 20th century. Mussolini's stance during World War I marked a critical shift in his political views. He broke away from his socialist roots and embraced nationalism, advocating for Italy's entry into the war. Do you think Mussolini's decision to support the war was a strategic move to gain power, or was it driven by a genuine belief in Italy's need to assert itself? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The post-World War I period in Italy was characterized by political turmoil, economic hardship, and social unrest. The promises made to Italy during the war, chiefly territorial gains, remained unfulfilled, leading to widespread disillusionment and the perception that the country had been shortchanged by the Treaty of Versailles. Meanwhile, the economy was in shambles with rampant inflation, high unemployment, and a rapidly declining standard of living. The so-called mutilated victory further fueled public anger, creating fertile ground for the rise of radical ideologies. Amidst this chaos, Mussolini's fascist party, Partito Nazionale Fascista, or PNF, capitalized on growing dissatisfaction with the liberal government's inability to address Italy's problems. Mussolini rebranded the fascist movement from its origins as a loosely organized group of war veterans and disillusioned nationalists into a disciplined political machine. The movement combined nationalism, anti-communism, and promises of order, appealing to a wide cross-section of Italian society, from industrialists and landowners to the unemployed and veterans. To enforce its influence, Mussolini organized paramilitary units called the Black Shirts Squadristi. These squads operated as both enforcers and propagandists, employing violence and intimidation to suppress dissent, silence opposition, and dismantle trade unions and leftist organizations. Black Shirt squads roamed the countryside, clashing with socialists and communists, often with tacit support from the authorities who viewed the fascists as a bulwark against Bolshevism. By 1922, the Fascist Party had grown significantly, both in membership and influence, with support from powerful business interests and conservative elites. Mussolini's rhetoric of restoring Italy to its past glory resonated widely, particularly among those fearful of a communist uprising or further instability. In October 1922, Mussolini and his party staged the March on Rome, a pivotal event in his ascent to power. Thousands of black shirts, dressed in their signature uniforms and brandishing weapons, mobilized in a dramatic show of strength. While the march was largely symbolic and lacked the military capability to seize control by force, it succeeded in creating a climate of fear and urgency. The spectacle was carefully orchestrated, with Mussolini remaining in Milan until success seemed assured, allowing him to avoid personal risk. The march's true power lay in its psychological impact. Italy's ruling elite, deeply divided and fearful of a potential civil war, saw Mussolini's fascists as the lesser evil compared to a possible socialist or communist uprising. King Victor Emmanuel III, who had the authority to declare martial law and potentially crush the fascist movement, hesitated, concerned that such a move might provoke greater unrest or lead to his abdication. He instead opted for appeasement. On October 29, 1922, the king invited Mussolini to Rome and appointed him prime minister, effectively handing over the reins of government. This event marked a critical turning point in Italian history. The March on Rome was less a popular revolution and more a calculated political gamble. Mussolini had skillfully exploited the weaknesses of Italy's liberal democracy and the fears of the ruling class, portraying himself as a savior of a nation capable of restoring order and national pride. The success of the March on Rome was the culmination of several factors: the Italian government's inability to resolve social and economic crises, the fear of communism, and the fascists' adept use of propaganda and intimidation all played crucial roles. Additionally, Mussolini's skillful manipulation of public opinion and alliances with key power brokers, including industrialists, the Catholic Church, and the military, ensured his ascent to power. From a fringe political figure, Mussolini had risen to become the head of government, marking the beginning of a totalitarian regime that would dominate Italy for over 2 decades. While the March on Rome symbolized the triumph of fascism, it also signaled the demise of liberal democracy in Italy. Mussolini's consolidation of power would soon lead to the dismantling of democratic institutions, the suppression of dissent, and the transformation of Italy into a fascist state. With the fascists firmly entrenched in power following the March on Rome, Mussolini embarked on a systematic consolidation of his authority, transforming Italy into a totalitarian state. By 1925, Mussolini had dismantled democratic institutions, declaring himself Il Duce, the leader. Through a series of laws and decrees, he eliminated political opposition and established a one-party state. Independent trade unions were outlawed, opposition parties were banned, and a secret police force, the OVRA, Organization per la Vigilanza e la Repressione dell'Antifascismo, was created to monitor, intimidate, and eliminate dissent. Mussolini fostered a cult of personality, presenting himself as the embodiment of Italian strength and resilience. Propaganda portrayed him as a tireless worker, a visionary leader, and the savior of the nation. His image was omnipresent, gracing posters, coins, and public buildings, while state-controlled media glorified his achievements and censored criticism. Through education and cultural institutions, fascist ideology was woven into the fabric of Italian society. Children were indoctrinated through organizations like the Opera Nazionale Balilla, and art, literature, and cinema were co-opted to extol fascist values. Mussolini sought to revitalize Italy's economy through a series of ambitious but ultimately flawed programs. His battle for grain campaign aimed to achieve self-sufficiency in wheat production, while the battle for births sought to increase Italy's population to bolster its military strength. These initiatives, though grand in scope, often produced mixed results and strained the already fragile economy. On the international stage, Mussolini's foreign policy was driven by ambitions to restore Italy to the glory of the Roman Empire. He pursued an aggressive expansionist agenda, beginning with the invasion of Ethiopia in 1935. While the conquest of Ethiopia marked a temporary triumph, it also isolated Italy diplomatically as the League of Nations imposed sanctions. Mussolini's alignment with Nazi Germany grew stronger during this period, driven by ideological affinities and shared militaristic ambitions. Italy's participation in the Spanish Civil War, 1936 to 1939, further cemented the alliance between Mussolini and Adolf Hitler, as both leaders supported Francisco Franco's nationalists. This partnership culminated in the signing of the Pact of Steel in 1939, committing Italy to a military alliance with Germany. Mussolini saw in Hitler a kindred spirit and sought to emulate his successes, though Italy's military and industrial base lagged significantly behind that of Germany. In June 1940, Mussolini declared war on France and Britain, eager to share in the spoils of a seemingly imminent German victory. However, Italy's military was woefully unprepared for a prolonged conflict. The Italian campaigns in North Africa, the Balkans, and particularly the disastrous invasion of Greece in 1940 highlighted the weaknesses of Mussolini's regime. The poorly equipped and poorly led Italian forces suffered humiliating defeats, necessitating German intervention and undermining Mussolini's stature. By 1943, Benito Mussolini's reign as Italy's dictator was on the decline rapidly. The combined pressures of military failures, growing domestic discontent, and the Allied invasion of Sicily spelled the end of his hold on power. Mussolini's leadership, once seemingly unshakable, now faced insurmountable opposition from both within and outside the fascist regime. On July 25, 1943, the Grand Council of Fascism, in an unprecedented move, voted to depose Mussolini. This marked the first formal rejection of his authority by his closest allies, many of whom had grown disillusioned with his leadership. The motion was led by Dino Grandi, a prominent fascist politician, and passed with a decisive majority. Seizing the moment, King Victor Emmanuel III summoned Mussolini to his palace and informed him that he was relieved of his duties as prime minister. The once mighty dictator was arrested and imprisoned in the remote mountain resort of Campo Imperatore in the Apennine Mountains. However, Mussolini's political demise was far from permanent. On September 12, 1943, in a daring operation codenamed Operation Oak, German paratroopers and commandos, under the direction of Otto Skorzeny, rescued Mussolini from his mountaintop captivity. The successful raid was a propaganda coup for Hitler and allowed Mussolini to be reinstated as the head of a new puppet regime, the Italian Social Republic Repubblica Sociale Italiana (RSI), headquartered in the northern town of Salo. The RSI, established under Nazi auspices, lacked genuine independence. Mussolini, reduced to a figurehead, presided over a regime that was entirely subservient to German interests. Despite his diminished authority, he attempted to portray the RSI as the legitimate continuation of fascist rule. However, his health, morale, and influence were in steep decline, and he struggled to command loyalty among his followers. As the Allies advanced northward through Italy, the RSI's control eroded and its territory shrank. By early 1945, the regime was on the brink of collapse. The cities under its control were ravaged by war, and popular support for fascism had all but evaporated. Resistance movements, particularly the Italian partisans, gained momentum, intensifying their efforts to overthrow what remained of Mussolini's rule. In late April 1945, with the war in Europe nearing its conclusion, Mussolini attempted to flee to Switzerland with his mistress, Clara Petacci, and a small entourage. Disguised as a member of a German convoy, he hoped to find refuge or negotiate his escape. However, on April 27, 1945, near the village of Dongo, Mussolini was recognized and captured by Italian partisans. The following day, on April 28, 1945, Mussolini and Petacci were summarily executed by firing squad in the small village of Giuliano di Mezzegra. The exact circumstances of their deaths remain a subject of debate, but the execution was swift and decisive, carried out by partisans seeking retribution for years of fascist oppression and collaboration with Nazi Germany. Their bodies were transported to Milan, where they were hung upside down in Piazzale Loreto, a public square alongside other leading fascists. This grim display symbolized the definitive end of Mussolini's regime and served as a stark warning against authoritarian rule. The square had previously been the site of a fascist atrocity, where partisans had been executed and left on display. The act was intended as both retribution and justice. Mussolini's death marked the conclusion of a dark chapter in Italian history. His legacy remains one of profound complexity and enduring controversy. While some view him as a charismatic but misguided leader, others condemn him unequivocally for the violence, oppression, and suffering wrought by his regime. Mussolini's rise and fall offer a powerful lesson about the dangers of demagoguery, unchecked power, and the seductive allure of authoritarian solutions to complex problems. His story stands as a cautionary tale, underscoring the critical importance of safeguarding democratic institutions and the rule of law against the encroachments of tyranny. To enjoy more documentaries like this, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more content on history's most fascinating figures and events.